What's up, everyone? My name is Bryce Koon, and welcome in to the Crowded Booth here on a Wednesday evening, September 25th, 2024, as we get ready for college football's Week 5. We got a special guest sitting in the background, and he said he can talk whenever, so we might just him in. It's me, myself, Will Manis, and a special guest that the Georgia Tech fans I know are going to be excited about. We're going to talk Week 5. We're talking UNLV. That and more on tonight's episode of the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. We're not going to play the song again. How's everybody doing? How you doing? I just got a text saying, are we not live on YouTube tonight? Is there a problem with the YouTube? Is there an issue? I like how I get text messages about this. No, we're live on YouTube right now there, my friend.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. We're live. We don't need to worry about that.
Good.
Bryce Koon alongside Will Manis. Thanks so much.
Do it live.
If you're watching live on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, or on the YouTube channel, make sure you give us a follow on those platforms. Subscribe to the channel, hit that notifications bell. You know when we go live every Monday and Wednesday evening. Will, we've got a special guest sitting in the background. Gavin says to go ahead and fade you. Yeah, we're going to look at best bets. Will's trying to get off of this 0 for 5 that he has started on the season. It has been brutal. I'm 2-3. Ralph is 3-2. We're going to get Ralph's best bets. He's not going to be on the show tonight, but we're going to get Ralph's best bet in here as well. And yeah. So, Will, how are you feeling though? Before we get into the whole show, how are you feeling heading into this week in terms of being able to go 1-5? Do you take it a week by week approach, or is there something else you need to do here?
Yeah, go week by week. There's an ex-Auburn head coach who's saying was go 1-0 today. So that's the goal, to go 1-0 every day.
Auburn Tigers too.
He only made it like 14 games, but who cares?
It is what it is. It is what it is. Well, tonight we're going to open up the show and talk a little bit about this UNLV situation. I'm going to bring our special guest here in just a second to get his thoughts on it. But Will, this is kind of nuts. It's kind of crazy. I think that it sets a precedent in college football that we've had a lot of precedents set over the past 3-4 years. This sets a potentially dangerous one, and one that I think is going to be very interesting for people who do not know. And they don't know. Our special guest, Palmer Thomas, by the way, we're going to go ahead and bring him in to talk about this. Palmer, how you doing, brother? You doing well?
Yeah, I'm coming to you from a remote location, not my office. Hunkering down with the storms coming.
Yeah, is it really bad in Georgia right now?
It's not terrible. I mean, it could get worse. But no, it's rainy. I just got a call from my mom saying, "Hey, make sure that you got all your portable chargers powered up, and are you ready to have no refrigeration? Eat PB&Js." And I said, "Mom, I got to go in the Crowded Booth. I'll talk to you later."
Is your mom's name Courtney Koon by any chance? That's
No.
It is what it is. No, that's we had obviously Hurricane Francine come through 2 weeks ago, and it was crazy. Gavin said my house is on fire, but I think Ralph did it. Ralph Claus, arsonist. Okay, so Palmer, I'm sure as you have. I mean, I know you've been obviously in the weeds of this Georgia-Alabama game all week, and myself in this LSU South Alabama contest on Saturday night, but the college football world was kind of just thrown this massive loop today with UNLV and what's going on there, a program under Barry Odom, who was successful last year and, obviously off to a nice start. So I wanted to get your thoughts and kind of explain the situation. It just seems to be a he said situation right now in terms of the NIL collective / the athletic department is stating that they've done their part and there wasn't anything, while the quarterback I guess we could call now the former quarterback for the
Ex-quarterback,
Running
yeah.
Rebels, the ex-quarterback is saying that, things were not met. Your thoughts on this situation? What type of precedent does this set in college football?
It's a mess. I mean, you very accurately describe it there in the title of the segment. It is a total cluster. You know what? And I think that there are there are things that probably need to be done to adjust in the college football world so that this doesn't continue to happen.
Yeah.
Kirby Smart was asked about it today on the SEC television. He said, and it's something that he has said before. He said he need to be held to things. Otherwise, you get that he said stuff. And so, if you don't have anything written, you're going to run across this. Now, I think it's not a good situation that you've got players that are opting out of the rest of their season around the country. I mean, and it's not just a UNLV thing. Bear Alexander, former Georgia player, announced that he's going to, opt to redshirt this year. And so, it's not a good situation anywhere. It's unfortunate for a program like UNLV that's having such great success this season, and takes away. It takes away from what they're doing on the field. It takes away from what everyone else on that team is doing right, because the administration, the players, whoever it may be, are doing something wrong.
Yeah. Will, your thoughts on what this could mean? Could we see a chain effect across the country? And I mean, we have to make the question too, like ask the question. This is probably happening other places, and without regulation, I don't see where this stops.
Yeah, I mean, it's so surprising to me because we saw Florida go through this just a couple years ago, a similar thing. I thought with such a high profile program like Florida going through it that the other programs would learn from that and get their ducks in a row, but maybe that's not the case. And like you said, without regulation, there's 132 FBS programs. They're probably doing this NIL thing 132 different ways. It's different for each school. Each NIL collective is different. So, at some point we're going to have regulation on this, and it'll probably take more of these situations where players are like, you know what, I'm going to argue with you about NIL and I'm not going to play, for these coaches and schools to be like, we've got to crack down. We got to do something.
It's embarrassing is what it is. I mean, it's
Yeah.
embarrassing for the sport. It's embarrassing for the NCAA to be coming across, having to deal with situations like this. It really is. It makes you wouldn't, and I would say you wouldn't see stuff like this happen in the NFL, but we see holdouts and contract disputes and all that all the time. But that's professional, and I guess that's where we're at, is that college athletics are professional athletics, and that you're going to have these types of situations, but that doesn't change the fact that it's embarrassing for a sport that's supposed to be built around amateurism.
Well, and that aspect of the sport's been dead, feels like, for quite some time now. And to your point with the SEC teleconference today, Brian Kelly was kind of posed the same question, and he kind of answered in the sense of revenue sharing. Like that's why this thing really needs to kind of move past the hurdles that it's kind of going through and jumping through these hoops, because they need this revenue sharing, because he feels like it would cut down on this.
But is that going to fix it, Bryce? I mean,
I don't think so.
You're going to. We've got revenue sharing, and look what's happening in the ACC. I mean, they're upset about the situations aren't going to be, hey, they're not paying me anymore. It's going to be, well, they're not paying me enough.
Yeah.
Because
and how about the outcry from Tennessee fans when Tennessee announced last week they're going to up their ticket prices for it? There was a lot of people not too happy about that.
I wanted to ask this both to y'all, because this is something that I was kind of thinking about. I was jotting down some notes for the show tonight about this, and I don't know if I hope that we figure out what's actually happening here, And just in terms like what really is going on. I think, like Palmer mentioned and Will kind of alluded to, without some sort of written employee-employer contract, we're probably not going to know the exact specific details of this, but the people involved do. To your point, Palmer, of wanting more money, what's to say in this situation where this young man playing quarterback over at UNLV, hey, they've had a good start to the season. They beat Kansas on the road. They're making a case, especially at a G5 school, making a case to potentially be the G5 representative in the playoff. Renegotiating that NIL promise or asking for more, because now you have the freedom to do what he's done. It kind of holds teams hostage. I think it's something where you have some schools of thought. Mike Gundy said, hey, we're not doing that. Brian Kelly has said, to our media that, hey, this is not something we're going to do. Essentially kind of the contract, when you're talking about the NFL, your contract's set. We'll talk about it after the season. But now we see, hey, here's the loophole that players could say, well, then I'm just not going to play.
Yeah,
Well,
whoever can take it.
You've said it a couple times. If I was a coach, it would kind of be that attitude that you said Brian Kelly's had, for a couple weeks. Nobody's walking through that door. We're just going to have to roll with who we have. And if you don't want to be a part of this team, that's on you. I mean, they're having conversations, sitting down, talking about how much they're hurting the team and things like that. So I don't know. I really don't know where you go.
Well, and it goes to, covering Georgia and hearing from Kirby on NIL a lot, it just goes to the importance of recruiting the right kind of kids, making that not the biggest thing. And that's not to say Georgia hasn't played the NIL game. That they certainly have. But I think that if you find kids that football is what's important to them, they're going to play football. They understand that football is their means to that money. And I understand this situation. It's a kid that came from a, lower tier school and got, has put himself in a position where he's now on a big stage, and, he can save his eligibility and stay on said big stage for another year. And, I'm certainly interested to see how this plays out, because as I saw somebody tweet, today, man, wouldn't it be really college football for Barry Odom to go get a Power 4 job next year and this kid to follow him?
Wow. That would be crazy. Reg Talk says you need contracts. This is kind of the last part I wanted to kind of, talk about this. You need contracts. I was joking. I was just on another show locally down here in Baton Rouge about an hour ago, and I joked. I said, what if we see a trade deadline? What if we see some type of free agent pool mid-season where you can pick a kid up and you can have some of that? I will never rule anything out in this sport, because 5 years ago, I didn't think we'd be seeing what we're seeing right now. But to this point of you need contracts, Palmer, I'll go back to you with this, the revenue sharing. I have maintained the stance that if you get into a contract employer-employee negotiation type of thing, players are going to want a cut of the media deal. And that's something that ADs and, in my opinion, presidents are never going to want. Because that $200K for NIL, that's pennies compared to the SEC's media deal and what Georgia's cut is to that. I see that kind of being the last hill they die on. Maybe your thoughts, obviously, from maybe the Georgia perspective, or just in general, what you kind of think on, will we really see contracts?
Yeah, and I don't even know that contracts fix the problems. Because, like I said, we've got contract holdouts. Who is it for the Jets? Hassan Reddick that's not, playing in these games and foregoing that money. It feels dumb, to do at the college level, because how does that affect your ability to take it to the next level? Now, if you're in the NFL, you're at the highest level, and, nobody but the NFL is judging you. So I don't know. Contracts, I feel like both in as it pertains to transfer portal and NIL, it's going to be important that there is some sort of written agreement, and that, both sides are held to it and legally obligated to be held to it. And that, there's buyouts. I do know that in some situations you've got kids that have signed away, and this was important from what Brian said on the teleconference was
Yeah.
you don't want situations where one place holds your exclusive rights to that.
Mm.
I know last year in the transfer portal, there were some situations where there were kids that had signed over their exclusive NIL rights to a place, a collective, whatever it may be, and entered the transfer portal and had to buy out of their agreement.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. That's interesting stuff. Here, I want to get a question, or go ahead with your thoughts. And I got a question down here I wanted to get to for Palmer on that. Any kind of more thoughts on, could we see contracts? What would that look like? And I think that just would open up another Pandora's box of issues and everything.
I'm not sure that they're calling them contracts, but I think there's some collectives that essentially have a contract, but they just aren't calling it that. I mean, but they're not really held to it. Either side. I think you mentioned it about, of course, I'm blanking on his name. I always do this. I always blanking on names. The offensive lineman that went to Georgia, that committed to Georgia Tech.
Josh Petty.
Josh Petty. Yeah. I thought that was his name. And Josh Petty, he's been offered this money and he's taken it, but he doesn't get it all up front. And if he transfers, he essentially forgoes that money. So, I mean, it's kind of a contract, but not really. But like I said earlier, there's over 130 ways that people are doing this. So I don't know.
I'm just curious how players are going to be held to these contracts and how collectives are going to be held to these contracts. And, you can – I understand what would end up happening would be, hey, you sit out, you forego that money. What's going to keep a player from doing that? Because I would imagine that's what's happening here at UNLV is that he's not getting paid. Obviously his dispute is, hey, they're not paying me. At least my understanding is that they're not paying me what we agreed to. I think, again, it's a he said situation where, the other side is saying, well, no, he's coming back to the negotiating table and trying to get more. It's an ugly situation. It's a mess. It's not what should be talked about with UNLV football. And unfortunately, regardless of what they do the rest of this season, that's what's going to be the talking point with them.
For all the heat that Dabo Swinney has taken lately, what was he saying 3 years ago? That they're going to be unionized eventually, and that's what it's going to come to. Once that happens, then there will be it'll be uniform across the NCAA. Everybody's gonna have to do it the same way. So he might turn out right on this one.
I wanted to add kind of my thoughts on here first. We talked about the he said situation. Folks, coaches do lie to recruits and players. I don't want to put this on players. It's a greedy kid. That happens. Palmer, I'm sure you've heard your fair share of stories. I've heard my fair share of stories of misrepresented promises is one of the terms I was told. And I'll just say this, I'm not going to put any names in here, but I don't cover this team anymore, but I cover, I'll leave it at that. There was a certain recruit last cycle who received NIL or payment in a form that could not be paid back. And he committed to that school because he felt like he had to. He then decommitted and committed to another school. So let's look at how do you can't regulate that.
And let's look at the very public saga that became Jaden Rashada, who's now at Georgia. I mean, that was a NIL dispute and agreement that couldn't be paid and resulted in him getting out of his national letter of intent and ending up playing somewhere else. And so.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Real quick, couple comments here. John Carty, and I imagine he's going with this situation. He goes minimum 2 seasons. He feels like there should be some type of agreement. That's not a bad idea. John, I don't know how you're going to get players to agree to it, though, because here's the thing. When you take this to a court, they're going to put up antitrust every single time.
They already are.
They already do. So every single time until you unionize, you're not going to be able to do that. And I don't know if the players want a union, really truly want to unionize once you understand all the things that come along with that. So it's a mess. Rec Talk says, Right now, there's nothing that keeps a player from taking money from school A and running to school B. Likewise, nothing keeps a school from lying to a kid. This has to change. I will
Isn't
say
that what happened under the table with Cam Newton?
I mean,
Who knows?
and honestly, this
Allegedly,
has been going on well before this.
yeah.
Well before
Hey,
this,
what-
unofficially, this has been going on.
What did Cam say? The investigation is still ongoing?
Yes. Gavin asked, how would a collective player in school negotiate a contract? Here's a great question, because the market hasn't been, there's not enough data points, I would say, officially out there to really kind of gauge this player's worth this player's worth that. So it's going to be
It would take years.
It would take years. I mean, you'd have to have, and this is generous, 10 years, 15 years worth of data points to go off of. I mean, maybe more. Jonesy asked, do taxes come out of this NIL money? He's not very keen on putting all of his comments into one specific comment. I'll be honest with you, I'm not educated on that. I don't know how the
I would
NIL
imagine
works
that
with
they
tax.
do. I would imagine, at least, I mean, it is income in one way or another, whether it comes out on the front end or the back end. It comes out.
Jonesy also asked, can Sam call and have a question? Palmer, we started a new show on Tuesday nights where it's Talking Ball and Talking Tuesdays, and we let people call in, and this guy called in and he literally had a 4-minute question that we couldn't even keep our faces straight because we had no clue what he was asking. And then Jonesy also asked, have you met Hannah Cavender?
I want to hear what Sam has to say on the UNLV mess.
That's true. Once Memphis and SMU start poaching players from UGA, Ohio State, you'll see change almost immediately. Palmer, I want to get your thoughts before we kind of shift focus here. When programs that have money, and I'm not as keen on Memphis here, but as I am like an SMU that can spend some dough, when they start taking from the rich, the Georgias, the Ohio States, when that happens, we've seen it kind of happen to Georgia a little bit. They've been, they've had guys enter the portal. Is that when we see real changes, when the rich teams are affected by this?
I don't know that it is, because, like you said, and let's take Memphis out of there. Let's put Colorado in there, though. Teams that, there are players that I think have made NIL decisions. I don't know that that's what changes it on a large scale, because I think that championship football and winning, again, it goes back to what Kirby was saying about recruiting the right guys and understanding the values. And I think that is what's always going to be important at the UGAs and the Ohio States. And when the UGAs and the Ohio States are competing with one another, that's where the NIL comes in from them. But that's, NIL is not their selling point, of Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama and, all those schools when they're recruiting against an SMU or a Memphis or a Colorado or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Dr. Bob says Ohio State has more money than everybody, a $20 million roster that they're willing to kind of go into it. It's a mess. UNLV's a mess. And I don't know. I will say this, folks. If it's happening there's way more instances I think that could come to light here over the next 5 to 6 months, especially when we get into this next portal cycle. It's going to be very interesting. You're going to have some people, some leak it. Real quick, last comment. Jonesy says, I think college football turns into minor league for NFL kids. Won't have to go to class unless they choose to. I could see that. I could also see a situation, if we really want to get far-fetched, where there's a football team in Athens, Georgia, and they have licensing rights to wear the Georgia G on their helmet, to wear the colors, to represent the Bulldogs, but they are not affiliated with the school other than that licensing agreement. I could definitely see that.
And I could see that too. I could also see a world in which to separate it from the NCAA, let's just say, I don't know what you want. Let's call it the College Football League. For very creatively named College Football League. Yeah. The College Football League could have class rules to it. Hey, you have to attend the university to keep that student athlete facade that it already is. You have to attend X amount of classes, X amount of hours, be an enrolled student at whatever university your football club is licensed with.
I like that. Will like that football club. It takes him over to the Premier League. He likes that. That's good stuff. UNLV, complete NIL mess. Let's move on. Obviously, the big game that we're going to be talking about here on the docket is one, Palmer, I imagine you're making the trip over to Tuscaloosa this weekend and I'll just say this, having been in Tuscaloosa last year, it's one of the more underrated environments in college football. They have really turned it into a spectacle in terms of the light show. It's rocking. I know those people might not get up for the Alabama Western Kentucky game, but with Georgia in town, it's going to be pretty crazy. Let's talk here. Georgia at number 4 Alabama, top 5 matchup. We'll hand it off to Palmer here to begin with. Palmer, I kind of think this is maybe round 1 of this that we could see over the course of the season. I think both football teams are very good. What's the cause of concern for Georgia? Obviously, coming off that Kentucky game, I know fans are kind of iffy. Jalen Milroe, I get this. What are your thoughts on this game? Maybe some keys to watch.
Yeah, there's a couple of matchups that Georgia has in the regular season that could be a preview to a rematch. I mean, they play Texas in a couple weeks. They play Ole Miss in November. They play Tennessee in November. Who's to say that they don't play multiple rematches with an SEC championship potential if they win those games, college football playoff rematch potential in a 12-team playoff? It would not shock me one bit if Georgia plays multiple rematches this year. So that aside, I'm very interested in this one. I think that to me, I have a good feeling about Georgia coming into Tuscaloosa and playing well, and it's more because of what we've seen over the years of Georgia. Just they don't lay an egg multiple times in a row, and they laid an egg against Kentucky. They got away with it, but against good, high caliber opponents, very often very rare that we've seen back-to-back bad performances from Kirby Smart teams. I really don't know the last time we did. So that being said, I mean, I would say that I feel confident in this UGA squad to come out and play better than it did against Kentucky. And I think that Georgia's better football that it played, if Georgia plays better and you put that up against Alabama, I think that they've got a good shot to win this. That's not saying they can't lose this game. But I do like Georgia's chances to win. I think Carson Beck is going to play better. He's got to play better, and it's something that I'll write for tomorrow morning for Dogs HQ. But Georgia's still confident in him. He hasn't played his best football, but I think that the good football is still in there, and they're confident in that. I think that he's going to need to work downfield and really challenge this Alabama secondary. I think that Georgia needs Dylan Bell and Dominic Lovett and Arian Smith and Colby Young to play well. The two that really I want to see more from coming out of this bye week would be Bell and Young, bigger bodied guys. And, it certainly has been a challenge for Georgia to go and replace Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. And we knew that was going to be the case. We're talking about 2 first-round caliber players. I know Ladd went in the second round, but I think it was with the second pick. And so, a top 35 pick. We're talking about 2 first-round caliber players. And, Kirby made the comparison between replacing them. He compared that to replacing the guys that were on that 2021 defensive line that had 3 first-round picks in the 2022 draft and another in 2023 with Jalen Carter. That was a challenge, and we've seen that is a multi-year process to try and replace those guys. You don't just replace them in 1 year. And I don't know that Georgia is going to replace Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey this season. They've got to find ways to try to replicate. It's the money ball, You've got to recreate them in the aggregate. And so I think that they will not – Georgia will not have a tight end like Brock Bowers this year. They will not have a receiver like Ladd McConkey this year. But that doesn't mean that the passing game as a whole can't do what it did last year. And I think that Carson Beck has to elevate the play for everyone around him. The players that are around him that are talented need to play up to their caliber. And I think if they do that offensively, Georgia's going to be just fine. Defensively, they have been just fine. They've yet to give up a touchdown this year. Go back, to last year against Florida State, 4 straight games without a touchdown they've given up. And that's nuts, especially when you consider that they played, granted it was a JV squad for Florida State, but look at what Clemson's done since they played them. They've gone out and put up 50 plus against 2, teams in App State and NC State.
Yeah.
That's not a bad offense. I don't know that it was in its best form against Georgia, but some of that probably had to do with Georgia's defense. I think Kentucky, that's a capable offense. That's an offensive line that has struggled, but I think that everyone was very down on Kentucky and is down on Georgia because of Kentucky played poorly against South Carolina. Everyone was down on Kentucky. Georgia played poorly against Kentucky. Everyone is even further down on Georgia because they were already down on Kentucky. I don't think Kentucky's as bad of a football team as everyone's making them out to be. So that's one thing. And then, again, on the greater point about the defense, I think that Georgia is really strong on both up front and on the back end. I think that they've got a group in the secondary with Malachi Starks and Dalen Everett and Julian Humphrey that can match up with the explosive ability of Alabama. That doesn't mean that they're going to completely shut it down, but I do think that they're going to match up well, especially when you factor in and added the front seven that they've got of, a really talented inside linebacker room that is worlds better than it was in the SEC championship game because Smile Munden is healthy. Jalen Walker is worlds better than he was last year.
Yeah.
And CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson were both true freshmen, and now they're sophomores. And they have a year of experience under their belt, and they have a year in a college weight room under their belt. And so I feel good about Georgia's defense. And I would say that this matchup comes down to, can Georgia get enough stops, and can they do enough offensively?
You kind of talked about, a lot of matchups, and I feel like this kind of game comes down to, it's probably going to be a typical Georgia-Alabama game. I don't have a strong feeling either way, personally, in how this game will turn out. I think that's how we've gone into almost every single one of the Georgia-Alabama contests. You don't really know. I will say people who are, and I said this last week on the show, Palmer, if you're judging Georgia based off of what happened in Lexington, you can't do that in this sport. You can't do that in this conference. I mean, this conference, I that same week I went and watched an LSU team face South Carolina team. That's a legitimate defensive front that the Gamecocks have, that causes some chaos. Real quick too, though, the injury report. We know London Humphreys is reportedly not going to be playing due to an illness. What's the status on a guy that, obviously in the Columbus area, a lot of people are familiar with Michael Williams. We know he has kind of been a guy that would like to come back and be able to, needs to be a big factor. And then just overall with a couple of the names that were out early in the season, maybe people have kind of forgot about. I mean, who is this, and what does this need to look like in terms of an injury report for Georgia, and how big of a factor could that be?
Yeah, London Humphreys is out. That became official based on the SEC availability report shared tonight. He's one of three that was listed as out. All of those are expected. Tate Ratledge underwent tightrope surgery on his ankle. He's going to miss some time. Roderick Robinson also, is dealing with underwent a surgery earlier this year. He's out on a scooter right now. And then Humphreys dealing with mono. Sokovie White listed as questionable. That's not a big deal. But I think that, when you look at Georgia and its bigger injury report, it does come down to Michael Williams and Warren Brinson and Jordan Hall. Those three defensive linemen need to get back on the field and give Georgia some snaps. I think that Williams especially, was so impactful in that first half of that Clemson game. And then, early in that second half too, he is a difference maker for Georgia. And I think that when you are talking about a defense that has to get pressure and get pressure on Jalen Milroe and make him uncomfortable, Michael Williams is the type of player that you want out there on the field. And I don't know that he's going to be 100%, but 50% Michael Williams is still pretty good. And in getting him back, it allows Georgia to not have to play the other guys quite as much. They had to play Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, Nazir Stackhouse, and Christian Miller 50 snaps plus each in that Kentucky game. That wears down on you, especially when you're going up against talented offensive lines. And so to get Michael Williams, Warren Brinson, and Jordan Hall back in any capacity would be big. to get them back in a full capacity like they kind of expect in Brinson, that's even bigger. And I think Williams is trending in the right direction. I don't know on Hall. He's the one that I would say, he's the one that I would say is the most questionable.
All right, man. I'm gonna get your pick in here, and then we'll get you out of here. We obviously appreciate your time, being able to talk with us. Georgia, per Bet Online, our sponsor here, does every single college football show. Georgia's that 2.5-point favorite on the road. What's your prediction? Maybe officially, what you want to put on the docket for the official? We'll count your pick this week for the Crowded Booth picks.
Yeah, I've got Georgia 31-24 in this one. I think that they need to hit that 30-plus point threshold because like I said, I think this Alabama offense is good. I think Georgia's defense is good enough to get enough stops, but I don't think they're going to completely shut them down. So offense has to step up. Like I said, I feel confident in their ability to do so, to bounce back after a rough outing against Kentucky. Defense has played well all year, so I like the Dogs 31-24, which would be covering that 2.5.
Palmer Tom's Dogs HQ on 3 Network. Make sure you check them out. We're going to have them on the show, obviously, continued later in the year, man. Appreciate you cutting date night a little bit short or something like that. Be able to hang out with us, man. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Palmer Toms, he does a fantastic job, and we appreciate his time. So you kind of got the full spiel from him from there. We don't have to rehash a lot of those things, Will. Jonesy had a massive issue with it. He said Palmer's turning into Sam, and then he said, just please cut his his mic out. And then he also said Palmer is correct. 31-24 would cover that. And Jonesy get his pick in, Bama 2, Georgia nothing. Will would love that. But in all seriousness, wanted to kind of add just my thoughts, Will, and then we'll go to yours, and then we'll go kind of to our games and watch and best bets here. Really, I kind of how I was hinting at, I don't really have a strong feeling either way on this game. It would not surprise me to see Alabama win by a touchdown. I don't see this game being more than a 10-point contest. I will say that. I think this is two very even teams. I do worry about the playmaking ability of Jalen Milroe if I'm a Georgia fan. I'm not worried about Georgia's defense and what we saw, or Georgia's offense. I think Carson Beck can make some plays, but I don't know. I don't know. I think Beck's going to be able to make some plays. I like what it is. Here's an interesting stat for you. Well, I said this on the show the other day, and I forgot to say, I'm going to start calling them. I know there's another podcast that mentions stats that should tell the story of a game. Well, I've got we're going to go a sticky note stat. Put it on a sticky note, put it on your mirror, because this is probably going to determine what it is. Alabama ran the ball in the SEC title game last year. They ran it 41 times, averaged 2.6 yards a carry, but they ran the ball so much. Homer just read us Phil Steele's preseason write-up on Georgia just then. Absolutely love it. They ran it 41 times. They hammered away at the run game. I think they're going to have to do that in this football game to soften up the Georgian defense. Kentucky did have some success early in the game. I'm taking Alabama to win this one at home. I think Alabama wins by a final score 28-23. I've got the Crimson Tide winning this one. How are you shaking out?
Well, Bryce, I think you fell for Vegas's trap. This will be the first time in 90 home games, which this opened at 1.5 and it's grown to 2.5. So I think it's going to close as Georgia being the road favorite. It'll be the first time in 90 home games, consecutive home games, that Alabama will not be a favorite. And with that short line, I think they're daring you to take Alabama. So I didn't have a strong feeling. I didn't have a strong feeling like you before, but then I saw what the line was and I said, okay, this feels like Georgia. But, for me, the two big questions is, can Georgia run the ball? Because I think this Georgia offense is completely different than last year. They're a run-first offense this year, I think. I mean, I was there at the Georgia-Clemson game. I think Clemson has a top 25, and that's probably being generous. Defense, it's probably better than that. And in the second half of that game, Georgia looked head and shoulders better, and maybe head and shoulders above everybody else in the country. So Georgia has the potential, certainly. I don't think anybody's doubting that, but and that was without Trevor Etienne. I got the right name. Yeah, there's two.
Yes. Yes.
Trevor.
Yes. Travis is playing for the Jaguars.
Right. Yeah. They're like the same. They're almost the same name, too. But whatever. Can Georgia run the ball against Alabama? Alabama's front seven really, really good. And 2, on defense, can Georgia contain Jalen Milroe? If you don't let him beat you with his legs, you said in the SEC championship they ran it 41 times. What he had at least 10 or 15 runs in that game. So can they keep him from beating them with his legs? If Georgia can do those things, they'll win this game. I don't really have a score. I guess I'll take a score. I think it's going to be low scoring, like you, both in the 20s. I'm going to say Georgia 27, Alabama 20.
Yeah, so we're right there
Got
around
Georgia
the
to win
same
by a
margin,
touchdown.
just
Yeah.
about. You got them by 7, I got them by 5. Wanted to add something too. Teams have not been able to run the ball on Georgia this
Mhm.
season so far. Clemson could, like you mentioned, could not run the ball on them. Kentucky couldn't, but they just committed to the bit in that game and said, "Well, we're just going to try to run it." Now, look, Alabama did that last year and it worked, but I don't know. I think if
nobody's really done anything against Georgia. They lead the country in. Let me screw that up. They're the only FBS team that hasn't allowed a touchdown, and they've surrendered just 2 plays of 20 yards or more. So nobody's done anything against them. You don't get explosives against Georgia's defense.
Here's the key. Alabama's going to score a touchdown in this game, but also Alabama makes a bread and butter with Jalen Miller at quarterback. And Will, I'm going to bring up bad memories, but I know you know this. You were in the building last year when it happened. They're going to run, and whether they make a dent or not, they're doing it to lull you asleep and do what Milroe does best and throw the ball 40, 50 yards down the field. That's what he can do. And that's what they're going to try to set up. So if they get 3 yards here, 2 yards here, 3 yards here, they're fine with that because they're just trying to lull those safeties up a little bit. And I think it's going to be very good football team. I think this is a big game. Round 1, I think we're going to see these teams. We could see them in Atlanta. I think we'll see both of them in the playoff as well. Maybe not playing each other specifically, but I think both these teams are playoff teams, obviously. Georgia, Alabama, going to be a fun one. We spent so much time talking of obviously UNLV, which I wanted to because it was a massive story in today's college football world in this game, that we're not really going to break down other specific games. Jonesy says no explosive. Ryan Williams would like a word. He goes, I think Milroe will also have 100 yards rushing.
If Milroe has 100 yards, if Milroe has 100 yards on the ground, Alabama's going to win the game.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, unless it's one run for 97 yards and then he doesn't do anything. But to your point,
maybe
yes.
Not.
That's the big game of the week we're taking a look at. Will, let's take a look real quick at some of the other games that we're going to be watching. Maybe not necessarily go as in depth before we get to our best bets of the week, which I know people are excited for. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel.
I just pulled out a couple of ranked versus ranked matchups. Oklahoma State, number 20 Oklahoma State travels to number 23 Kansas State. Ralph sent me a text. He was looking at this game for his best bet, and he said both teams suck. I think this one could get ugly, which is the new Big 12. Both of these teams, they play defense, they run the ball. Lack of explosives, especially from Oklahoma State. Their quarterback needs to get a job.
And 3 weeks in a row, he said that on the podcast.
I'm tripling down after what they did to Tulsa, and en route to my 0-5 start to best bets. Just tripling down on that take. And Kansas State, they've stumbled a little bit out of the gate. They were expected to, I think they were 3rd in betting odds to win the Big 12. They're not off to a good start.
Well, they went to BYU, which is one of the more underrated places in the country, and they couldn't do anything. Couldn't do anything. Smoked. I'm ready for a BYU UCF Big 12 title game. Just throw that out there.
And there's a certain Kansas State fan that has to do an unspeakable thing to a Taco Bell beefy 5-layer burrito.
We might live stream and do a watch party. Ralph said he'll click that link. He said he'll click that link. No doubt about it. I love it. No, that's a good game. That's a good game to watch. We'll kind of keep rolling through these as well. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Big 12 de facto elimination game could be for the title. For the title game.
I think so.
And I love this. Dr. Bob says Liv Moss. That's amazing. BYU's Twitter. Did you see that? BYU's football Twitter account? That was amazing.
How about BYU is strange things are going on. You've seen their starting quarterback? He's Jewish. First ever Jewish starting quarterback for BYU. I didn't know that was allowed.
Well, I'm not going to have a comment on that. But yes.
Next game. A lot of our viewers will probably have their eyes on this one. Louisville travels to Notre Dame. Top 20 matchup in South Bend.
Look, I mean, I know this doesn't have necessarily ACC implications, but Louisville, number 15 team, you're starting to creep into the territory of what we talked about last night of the call-in show. Like, could the ACC get another team in if Louisville gets a win here? First off, if Louisville wins, Notre Dame's out of the playoff, which is going to open up another spot.
Yes.
And if Louisville wins this, now you're in the case of where if you keep building momentum, you might be able to get an at-large bid. And this would be a good check on the resume, in my opinion, for that.
Yep, I agree with you. I think this is going to be a tough physical game. Both of Notre Dame, I still think people haven't, I don't know. Maybe I'm just living under a rock, but it kind of seems to me like people just don't recognize how physical Notre Dame is. Marcus Freeman has turned them into a physical team on both sides of the ball. And we've seen Louisville; they can be physical. Louisville can kind of do anything. I think
Tyler Shuck's a good quarterback.
Tyler Shuck's a great quarterback. They're very well coached by both Brahms on the offensive side of the ball. But Jeff Brom, the guy's a gamer. I mean, he's always been a gamer. He's a gamer as a head coach. This is going to be a very physical game, probably lower scoring than you would think for two top 20 teams.
I don't mind that. It's going to be a fun one. Real quick before we get to the next one, David says that BYU Baylor could be fun. That could be a fun one. We're not going to go to that comment. Gavin says, talk about the start to Auburn's 8-game win streak. I'd rather do anything but.
Nope.
Jonesy apparently has had not the beefy, but the Beffy 5-layer burrito. And so there's that. Louisville, Notre Dame. That's going to be a fun one. No, that is going to be a fun one. Well, how many more we got on the docket?
That's all I got. I think those are the only ranked on ranked. I think we talked about all three ranked on ranked, unless I missed one.
I'll throw this. Obviously, Florida State SMU is going to be one that's just interesting to watch. SM just from the perspective that this will be SMU's first time hosting an ACC opponent. Not the buzz that it was going to generate, but SMU bounced back in a major way last week. Massive win. And Sonny Dykes got ejected from that game, which was even crazier. What do they call that one? The Battle of the Skillet, which is just amazing.
Battle for the Iron Skillet, yeah.
The Iron Skillet. I love that. I absolutely love that. A matchup I wanted to kind of go back to, top 25, Penn State, Illinois.
I did miss that
Penn
one.
State's an 18-point favorite in this one, ladies and gentlemen, per Bet Online. You don't see that in top 25 matchups very often.
No, especially unless you're playing number one. Penn State's not number one, but
especially for two Power 4 teams.
That'll be another physical game. Brett Bielema, the turnaround he's done at Illinois and as quickly as he's done it is pretty remarkable. I
like it. All right, is it best bet time? Do we need to rock and roll here with some best bets? Okay,
let's see me go 0-6
for real quick. All right, I'm 2-3. I'm on a 2-game losing streak. I kind of went off gut emotion. I got the news today, and that's why I picked what I picked. I'm looking at some other ones that could be, in terms of that. Oh, David, commenter of the night. Colorado heads down to UCF. That is a massive game. Massive game in Orlando. Big game momentum for Colorado. Does that win over Baylor help them?
Also, note on that, UCF is favored. Let me get the number right. I think it's 2 touchdowns. Let me get the number right here.
Yeah, Central Florida's
14 and a half. I'll tell you this. As somebody that watched Gus Malzahn for 7 years, this is a game he loses. This is a game where UCF, and they're coming off a bye week. UCF, this is a spot to fade UCF, which would be detrimental for me in a number of ways. I picked them to win the Big 12. This would be a bad mark on them to drop this game. But like I said, I watched Gus Malzahn at Auburn for 7 years, and this is the type of game that he loses.
I got another one for you. It used to be this cool name that they ripped off of Georgia Tech, but now they've gone soft and they call it the Georgia Grown Bowl. It's Georgia State, Georgia Southern. Georgia State's a 3-point favorite. They got it sponsored, so at least they got some money out of it. And I don't even know who that money goes to. Okay, best bets. Now I want to tell you, if you're going for a super dog, okay. Clayton says, "Boys, I'm sorry I'm late. How much time do I have left? I don't know. You have to ask God. He's the only one who can answer that question. We got about 10 minutes left. We're doing our best bets right now. If you want a super dog, Virginia Tech plus 19.5 against Miami is tempting and tantalizing to take for me. Yeah, UNLV can't pay their players $100K. They're probably right. First time commenter on the show. That's amazing. All right, Will. Let's roll out our best bets. I'll go first here.
Yep.
In light of what's going on, I'm taking Fresno State, who is a solid football team. Will, we talked about Fresno State being that first opponent. Their only loss is to Michigan, who Michigan bounced back with a big win against USC last weekend. Solid opponent. I am taking Fresno State plus 1.5 at UNLV. I like the odds. I want this one. I'm locking in my best bet for week number 5. I think you're going to capitalize on your quarterback leaving halfway during the week. I will tell you this, Dr. Bob, lock it in right now because I think that these odds will shift as the week goes on.
Yeah, if you want to put your own money on this game, do it now.
Yeah, no, you do that for sure. That's my best bet. Will, let's roll yours.
I love it. Army minus 12.5. The Army's going to make the playoff. Army has, and I'm ruining Army's season right now. Army has just utterly dismantled every team they played. Temple is one of the worst teams in the country. I'm seeing another just Army blowout right here, like they've done to basically everybody.
All right. Okay. We believe and we stand with you, Will, in this moment of turbulence, in this moment of you've been disgusted. Everyone shoot Will a message. Yeah. Army in the playoff, drug test him. That's what this guy says. He loves America. Final score, Dr. Bob says Army 42, Temple 30. Good Lord.
Probably.
That would be crazy.
Although I don't see Army giving up 30.
Clayton's getting some of his bets in here. He goes Kentucky money line's a sleeper. Who's Kentucky play?
I couldn't tell you.
How about Mississippi State plus 38.5 against Texas? How do we feel about that? That is a ton of points for a conference matchup.
I thought I was the sicko committee.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a hate bet against Louisville. He says Notre Dame covers, USF money line, and Northern Illinois money line. Let's roll Ralph's best bet out there.
Kentucky plays Ole Miss.
Ralph's going Duke minus 2.5 against North Carolina, an ACC matchup. A lot of Tech fans will have an eye on for that one, and could be interesting. I will tell you this. I locked mine in. Another one that I really loved was Navy minus 3.5 at UAB. But we'll see.
Yeah, I like that one too.
We'll see. The doctor, not Dr. Bob, Dr. Barry says take Wisconsin money line. Who does Wisconsin play?
They play. Come on, stop being slow.
While you do that, how do you like Nebraska minus 10 flat at Purdue? Nebraska with a bounce back win on the road?
I like that. Wisconsin plays at USC.
Okay, Dr. Barry.
I don't see it, Dr. Barry.
If this one happens, I'm going to have a fun time. Tune into the Go 24/7 live stream if that happens. I'm a big Major Applewhite stan. I like him. I like him a lot. Future head coach at Auburn, Ralph? Will? Major Applewhite?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you can't handle that. A couple more bets that I don't mind when you start to really kind of look at it. Liberty minus 3 at App State. App State's really bad, I think, right now, and they're down bad. I could see that one. What was my other one that I kind of liked? Was Oklahoma minus 1.5 against Auburn. How do we feel about that, Will?
I think Oklahoma's winning I think Oklahoma wins 14-6. Neither team can score.
Okay. I
will once again spend Saturday being disgusted.
Absolutely disgusted. But you know what? It's okay. All of those bets are presented by Bet Online. Oh, go ahead, Will.
How about Tulane minus 5 hosting South Florida? You will be in the building.
We'll see.
Allegedly.
University of South Florida. How about Stanford plus 22 against Clemson?
I think Clemson wins by 50.
Maybe. Is Ralph watching Troy minus 7 against ULM, General Maximus Booty?
If he's not watching, I'll go ahead and tell you what he would say. Absolutely not.
I will tell you this: I'm not sleeping. I'll tell you. Here's a bet that I think is going to hit. I'm taking, and I've already booked this one in on FanDuel. Oh shoot, shouldn't have said that. Not a sponsor. On Bet Online. South Alabama LSU over at 65.5. That's what I'm going with. Clayton says I bet
Clayton is the
against whatever Will
smartest person
says.
in the chat, saying he bets against whatever I say.
Mr.
Smart.
Auburn is a playoff team. I will stand up for Clayton or Will and say I am the one who said Auburn could be a sleeper playoff team this year. Will did not. Will thought I was crazy, and we can go back to the show and say it because he actually did say, Bryce, you're way too high on them. I don't believe you. And he's also been depressed all year. South Alabama covering versus LSU, South Alabama plus 22 in that sense. Hey, that's some great best bets. Thanks so much for tuning in. Great show. Palmer Tom's on the program. He is a fantastic friend of the show, and we're going to have to get him back on. I mean, we need to start bringing in a weekly guest to kind of talk some ball with us there, and we'll get Ralph back on the show. Stay tuned because we will be live.
The comments were calling for Sam. Maybe Sam should be a recurring guest.
He could be a calling guest. Make sure, kind of new show schedule. We're going to be live Mondays and Wednesdays talking college football. We will be Tuesday nights talking Tuesdays. That's the name right now. We'll see how it kind of flows. But talking Tuesdays, we'll talk ball with you where we want you to talk to us, call the phone line. And then obviously for the Tech fans, that's kind of those Sunday, Thursdays. No show tomorrow night, though, on Thursday because my boy Ralph's making his way into Baton Rouge this weekend. So it'll be interesting. Clayton says, Will, who do you cheer for this weekend? Just in Auburn or in Alabama, Georgia?
No. Can they both lose?
That's how Will feels about it. If Will feels about it. We might be live Saturday night, just kind of a college football reaction show. Go ahead and knock it out then, because Ralph's gonna be driving back. It might be a late night live stream, but those kind of have done well. And so I know Will's gonna be working, but we'll see kind of how we can finagle that and work it. So
hey,
Will Manus,
things have been adjusted, so I'm down.
It's made Auburn's 2-2 start much better. I will say that. So
Yes,
we'll see. Will Manus, Bryce Koon. My name is Bryce Koon. I've already said that 3 times. Ralph Leary, not in the background. Palmer Tom's on the show. He's a heck of a guest. Make sure you give him a follow over at Dogs HQ. They do a great job over there at the On3 Network. They do a fantastic job. It's good stuff. Very good stuff. We'll catch you next time. Crowd Booth, Bet Online. That's where you get all your bets. Make sure you do it responsibly, and we'll see you next time. Probably Saturday night. Stay tuned, hit the notifications bell so you know when we schedule another live stream, little college football week 5 reaction. See you later, folks.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The crowded booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.